Ricardo, shall we start?
Yeah. So, welcome everybody. This is the fourth webinar run by the Graduate School of Public Policy of Nazarbayev University. We are very happy to have you here. We are especially grateful to Bruno Balvanera for agreeing to giving a speech in this webinar series. Bruno Balvanera was the director of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development for Central Asia, and is distinguished track as a practitioner, and he will be talking to us on governance and sustainability, a theme that is very important for us because, as you know, the motto, the slogan of the Graduate School of Public Policy is "Good Governance Matters." It is in many ways an homage to the Governance Matters paper or working paper that Danny Kaufman, Cray, and Paolo Zoido Lobaton published in 1999. And so what we've been trying to do as scholars and practitioners was to promote an underlying importance of good governance to achieve developmental results. And key to development is the issue of sustainability. So to have such a prominent speaker talking on these issues for us is a great pleasure. But before I give the word, Bruno a chance to make his presentation, I think that we have a short presentation introduction by Laura Vaigoranova, who was one of our students, and then it's going to be Bruno until 6:30, and then we'll open up the session for Q&A. And during the presentation, as usual, if you want, you can write questions in the chat that will be answered and addressed as quickly and as efficiently as we can. Thank you. Laura?
Thank you for giving me the floor. I'm very happy to be part of this conference, so to speak, and I'm very glad that Mr. Balvanera has the ability to share his knowledge and experience with us, because Mr. Balvanera was the managing director of EBRD Central Asia for a very long time. He was based in Kazakhstan, and he has more than 30 years of working experience, which is amazing. So we need to take after him, listen to his advice and experience. And I myself got acquainted with Mr. Balvanera in the fall of 2019 when I was organizing Coco Fest, which is the adaptation of Mexican Dia de Muertos, the Day of the Dead. So I got to know him through this amazing event because he was born in Mexico and he was one of the first people to support our event. He donated to the event and he came with his whole family. I was very glad to meet you at that event, and I was very happy that you're such a kind and open person, like very simple. He didn't even know me, but he responded, he got back to us, he came to celebrate with us, and that was very amazing. So I'm very pleased to know you. I'm very happy to introduce you now at this conference, and I guess I'll give you the floor now.
Thank you very much for the very kind introduction, Laura and Ricardo. And I'm extremely pleased and excited to have the opportunity to speak with all of you here at the Nazarbayev University. Laura is right. My first, I'm going to put my presentation in the screen. Hold on a second. My first interaction with my first interaction with Nazarbayev University was through the kind invitation that Laura extended to me to a Mexican party in Nur Sultan. Can you imagine? For my family and me, it was extraordinary. And not only it was extraordinary to go there, but it was so well arranged and with so many real traditional details. So I was very pleased, and also very pleased to meet some of my connationals that study in Nazarbayev University. And through the time, I got to know a little bit more Laura and how active she is in her Spanish courses, in her dancing courses, in her preparing students to their application into big universities, and overall engaging in as many activities as she can. So thank you so much. For me, it's an honor. And thank you also, Ricardo, for the introduction. Clearly, you are much more experienced than me, although Laura already said that I have 30 years. Actually, I have 35 years of experience. I hope you do not think I am old. I'm young in my heart, and that's why I like to speak to students. I have 10 years in Mexico, where Ricardo went, he just told me, and then 25 years almost in EBRD, including living in Kazakhstan, living in Georgia, living in Russia, and somehow I have specialized myself into CIS. Ricardo is more of a political scientist. I studied political science along engineering. I don't know how well these two things go together, but they go together. And then I became a development banker. And when I was proposed to speak to you, one, given that you are the School of Public Policy, second, that your slogan is good governance matters, and third, because we are in Kazakhstan, which is clearly an engine of renovation, of modernization of the whole of the CIS, and what Kazakhstan has achieved is really remarkable, including the university itself. I propose to speak about governance and sustainability. And as you can see in my presentation, I put two hands shaking because they go along together. My presentation is going to be a bit more about private sector. I have always worked as a banker, development banker, but very much focused on private sector, although EBRD also finances public sector, but the aim is the development of the private sector. So while I'm going to give some examples of how governance and sustainability also is very important for public policy, what I'm going to focus is more on those topics in terms of business. Now, let's start with governance. And if you look a little bit into the background of what is governance, and as I said, this is a concept that applies both to public and to private sector, it is a way by which organizations are directed and controls are implemented. What does that mean? That means that it is a body in which is going to give the direction to the organizations and is going to check the implementation of it. Good governance creates results and creates value. Before starting this conversation, briefly with Ricardo, we were talking about Nazarbayev University, and I was saying how impressed I am about the university in terms of the building, in terms of the investment, but very much in terms of the students and the faculty, and how much the ranking, international ranking of the university has been improving over time. And this is somehow, I would say, thanks to the good governance. It creates value in the university, it creates value in the governments, and it creates, of course, value in companies. When you do not have good governance, you are subject to many risks. You do not have control. So overall, what I would say is that good governance improves the accountability and the transparency of any organization. And I wanted to use the word organization rather than the company, because this applies to any group of individuals with a specific target, whether public, whether private. It makes an organization more efficient and competitive. It makes it more attractive to investors. This is probably more applied to the private sector, but it also applied to the public sector, and you will see it in my next slide. And it helps to reduce risks and losses. And more importantly, it is a way to have checks and balances. And this concept of checks and balances is probably a concept that has been important for the last 20, 30 years, but it was not there before. It is very important always in whatever decision you make, whether it is public or whether it is private, to have checks and balances, to be responsible and accountable for the decisions that you are making. Now, in terms of public sector, and I wanted to think about an example of public sector, about good governance. And the example that came to my mind is, you may be aware, those who are in business are very much aware, probably you are as well, that the World Bank publishes every year a ranking, country by country, 200 countries around the world, a ranking of how easy it is to make business in that country. It is very theoretical and it's very subjective, but it gives a little bit a good measurement about the transparency of the decisions, about the governance of what is important for the business people to make an investment. And basically, they focus that in 5 and only 5 criteria, and each of these criteria has a number of sub-criteria. The 5 criteria is how easy it is to start a business, to create a new company, to register it. How easy it is to get your construction permits approved. How quickly can you start to erect the building you need? How easy it is for you to get electricity and to be connected to the network. How easy it is to register your property. And this morning I was attending a conference on blockchain, and it's amazing how blockchain and technology now is moving not only to things that would think more traditional, but in Georgia, for example, property is registered on the blockchain, but that's also important. And getting credit, how easy it is for people to go to the bank and to get money to develop the business they want to do. So the ranking has 200 countries, and I decided to put in front of you only those as a benchmark and that I think are important for you. So USA is number 6. Georgia has traditionally always been very high in the rankings since Saakashvili, and last year was number 7. And then you have a couple of Western countries, UK and Germany, and pop, the first country in the region that comes in number 25, impressive number 25, is Kazakhstan. And since I have been a practitioner for a number of years, I decided also to check what were the rankings 10 years ago, from 2010 to 2020. Kazakhstan, 10 years ago, was number 63. And I remember at that time, it was a very impressive number. But having said that, it has improved by 33 ranks. And that means that in a number of decisions that are related to the 5 bullet points that you can see there, there is transparency, there is governance about these 5 decisions. Maybe in practice, I accept probably it's not that easy to do business in Kazakhstan and in a number of countries, but in theory, Kazakhstan is number 25. Now, the most impressive country out of the 200 is Russia. And I remember in 2010, I was living in Moscow, and I was very much involved in attracting foreign direct investment, and doing business ranking was extremely important. 10 years ago, Russia was 120 in the ranking. And last year, it was only 25. So that's 28, sorry. So that's 92 ranks that it has advanced. 92, that's almost half of the 200 that were there. And this is impressive because I remember at the time the president was Putin, he still is, probably that's not very good governance, but I remember that he said, my objective is to bring Russia to top 60 in 5 years, to top 50 in 7 years, and to top 30 in 10 years. And he achieved. And this is important because vision and determination is extremely important. Few other examples to comment. China is 31, it was 89. Also, we know how much business there is there. Azerbaijan has not really improved a lot over time. It's basically the same as it was. Armenia is also probably about the same, Belarus. But another very impressive country is Ukraine. it was 142, now it's 64, that's 78 ranking. The one in the list that has gone down is the Kyrgyz Republic. The Kyrgyz Republic, your neighbor, had a tradition of being a country very democratic, but I'm afraid that so much democracy has created a little bit of a discontrol and a little bit of lack of people making decisions, because people are afraid to make decisions because they will be put in jail as soon as the opposition comes to power. Anyway, that I think is important, because focus on governance, focus on transparency, in this specific case, improves the ranking and in theory would also improve the attractiveness to invest in that country. Continuing a little bit more into the traditional way of business, this is an example from EBRD, and I'm using many examples from EBRD. There is an energy company in Romania that is the gas company in Romania, in which EBRD became a shareholder, in which it appointed an independent director to the board. And as a result of that, the rating agency said, this is going to improve the corporate governance standards and eventually the value of the company. Very good. There seems to be a young student listening to us. There you go. Very good. Now what is somebody with a microphone open? Maybe. Okay. No. So what is the role of the independent board in the companies? Is to provide leadership to achieve the objectives, the KPIs, within a framework of prudent and effective controls. And that will mitigate the risks and will manage the risks. So there is a clear reason why companies need to have a board. An independent and effective board is a precondition for sustainable development. And that's why I was saying that these two concepts go hand in hand and is going to foster the attraction of long-term results. Very good. Now, if we go a little bit into the details, and I don't want to go a lot into details because this is more about business, but the role of the board of directors in an organization, whether it is public, whether it is private, it is to define the strategy, to have a fiduciary obligation, responsibility to oversee in general how the organization is doing and the kind of risks the organization is taking, is responsible to appoint the CEO, the leader of the organization, sometimes also senior management, and to evaluate them. And then, of course, to think about succession planning. Now, when you think about government, it's very important to think about succession planning. And if I may, in the specific case of Kazakhstan, we know very well that President Nazarbayev has really been and deserves the title of the father of the new Kazakhstan, but at the same time, he is now managing his succession. We will see how the succession goes with President Tokayev, and how then President Tokayev will succeed to somebody else. This is succession planning. And the board of the country should be the leaders of the country, probably in the Senate, probably in the deputies, but they are responsible to enable the direction of the country, the strategy of the country, and to choose and select the leadership and to think about succession planning. So it is as important in private as it is in public sector. Going more on to private sector, you need to have effective management systems to oversee that. You need to make sure that the decisions are transparent, that there is compliance, and compliance is a very broad, I would say, concept that talks about who is who and why you make decisions on certain people when it comes to, I don't know, to appoint somebody, to make a decision on a specific contract, and so on and so forth, and to have the relationship with their shareholders. And of course, people in the board of directors, they have a duty of care. They need to care about the company they are working for. They are working for this company. They need to be loyal. They need to avoid any conflict of interest. You cannot be in the board of two competing organizations. You need to be loyal to the one that you are sitting. And you need to have a sense of obedience in terms of the rules, but not necessarily in terms of the decisions and the recommendations that you need to take. And this is why the board composition is so important, because you need to have a diversity of opinion, and you need to have members of the board that will have the courage to say what they think rather than to wait and to go along with the views of the others. We'll talk more about that now. Now, independency. Is it important to be independent? Yes. It has pluses and it has minuses, as we're going to see a little bit later. But you need to have somebody that is from outside the company, that has experience, that has the knowledge, that can bring good ideas, but they have the independence to make decisions without conflict of interest and in the best of the interests of the organization. But independence is extremely important, because when you have all the members of the board that are following one specific decision that they are giving, that they are not independent, then there is no point to have a board. Okay, I was saying there are benefits and there are some drawbacks. Well, in terms of the benefits is that the independent board is going to represent the interest of the company and of all the shareholders. Well, you know, in a listed company in New York or in a big market, you have many shareholders. Think about Apple or think about Amazon, or even though they have a main shareholder, they have a variety of shareholders. So the member of the board is not representing one specific shareholder, but is representing all the shareholders. They need to provide a third-party advice and oversight. They need to be independent, and they need to say, I know that in this industry, the trend is going there. We need to move our ship and we need to go to a certain place rather than continue the way the management is doing. And they need to be providing a healthy challenge to the management. You know, people tend to be complacent. If people are not under an oversight, under scrutiny, they can become complacent. The role of the board of directors is to be challenging. Why this happened? Why you made this decision? So it's not only good news, it's probably also not so good when you're in the board. You have people that are less informed about the company. Members of the board do not work only for that company. Actually, they do not work as a permanent staff of that company, so they do not have the same knowledge. Probably they have just been appointed and they need to make decisions, and the CEO and others have been in the company for all their lives. So obviously they do not have the same level of information. Some of them, particularly when we're talking about the public sector, may not behave with true independence. And I will give you some examples of 3 organizations, public-private organizations in Kazakhstan, and I will tell you how the board composition is done. And sometimes there might be a bad decision of the appointment of members of the board, that they want to be there just because it gives them status or whatever, but they are not really engaged or they are not really qualified. But at the end of the day, this is the decision of who you are appointing and why you are appointing this specific person. So before we go to that, let me give you a little bit of research from Kazakhstan. I looked into 3 organizations that are extremely important, and they are public organizations because they are owned by the government, they are owned by by the country, but they work as companies in the private sector. So the first one is Sanbrook Casino, which I'm sure you know is the owner of many of the large public companies, Gas Telecom, the company that was just privatized in uranium, also Air Astana, Gazprom Gas. So all these companies, they are owned by the government, but they are interacting as private companies. Now, normally, it got a little bit my attention that in the 3 examples that I have found, there is a number of members that is not what I think, because normally it's 3, 5, 7, 9, so that in case there is discrepancy, you will always have majority. But in the case of Kazakhstan, I found 8 members in the Sanbrook Casino. 3 and only 3 represent the government. I really was very much surprised positively that in the board of Sanbrook Casino, that is the wealth of the country, the board that makes the ultimate decisions and sets the direction, in a board of 8, you only have 3 government representatives. Mr. Simov, as you know, is the CEO. The Minister of Economy, Mr. Danilov, whom I know very well, and an advisor of the president. Only 3 out of the 8. Then you have 1 Kazakh that is an entrepreneur, the owner of RG brand, successful entrepreneur. And I thought it was an excellent idea to bring a 4th Kazakh, but not representing the state, representing the private sector. So you have 4 Kazakh and you have 4 foreigners. You have, very interesting, somebody coming from Singapore, not surprisingly, because a lot of the model of development of Kazakhstan, both in terms of Sanbrook Casino, that is very similar to Temasek over there, but also in terms of leadership in the country and succession, it seems that Singapore has been the example that President Nazarbayev decided to take. So you have 1 representative from Singapore, 1 entrepreneur consultant from Italy, like Ricardo, 1 British and 1 Turkish. Very interesting. Turkey is a very important country for you, and British as well. So I really found that the composition of the board of Sanbrook Casino is ideal. Very good one. Now, under Sanbrook Casino, each of the companies have their own board. I didn't look into them. But then I looked into Bayterek. You know, Bayterek is this state company that, that owns more the financial assets of the country. So here you have not 8, but you have 10 members of the board. And you have, I would say a little bit disappointingly, 7 members of the government. You have the Prime Minister, Mr. Mamin. You have an advisor of the President. You have a Deputy Prime Minister. You have the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Industry, the Minister of Economy, and the CEO. One would wonder how much independence these members have. How independent are they? I understand that the assets of Bayterek are owned by the state and the state would like to have a vision on them. But in my personal view, I would feel much more comfortable about the governance of Sanbrook Casino than of Bayterek. Finally, I looked into the Astana International Financial Center, that, as you know, is a very interesting, is the neighbor in front of you. I was speaking with Ricardo earlier on, is an impressive space, also led by an impressive gentleman, Kairat Kalimbitov, very impressive, who was the chairman of the central bank. And in his board, he has 8 members, 5 are, I would say, from him, and 3 are foreigners. I think this is a little bit more balanced than Bayterek. knowing Mr. Kalimbitov, I think probably he's waiting for the good time to have a little bit more of an even 4 and 4. So these are examples of how board of companies are created and formulated. And these are companies that are very special because these are public companies. Now, let me go a little bit into my presentation. Now, in this board, you have 2, 4, 6, 7, 8 members. So again, this example, where on one side you have the CEO and the rest is, I don't know if he's a member of the board or not. Normally the CEOs are members of the board. And then you have the independent directors. This example is not conducive for a good governance. It's not on the one side you have the board of directors and the other one you have the management. You need to have a team. Sorry. Another one a little bit illustrating. The board of a company is not a social gathering. It is not a place to take coffee, not to argue, to smile. You can get along very well with everybody outside the room, but when it comes to discuss the matters of the company, it's not about pleasing the others. It is about expressing what you think is important, and sometimes the truth and sometimes your views may not be the same as the others, and they may create a challenge. So it's not necessarily a place where you go to feel comfortable. It is a place where you go because you need to be loyal to the company that you are defending. And personally, you can have very good relationship with other members of the board outside the room. But in the room, it is about focusing about the future of the organization. Finally, a little bit, the role of the chairman is extremely important because in no matter what group of people, whether it is to organize a party, whether it is in a family, whether it is in a company, whether it is in a political party, many people have different views. And everybody wants to do what they want. But you need to have somebody that can moderate, that can lead, that can engage the members of the board into a conversation that is well structured and is going to come to a solution that is going to satisfy to the majority. And if not everybody is comfortable with it, at least he needs to make sure that everybody is committed to whatever decision has been made. So it is a little bit political science because it's about people. It's about interacting people about matters that are sensitive. So what do directors bring to the company? Well, number of things. Very important, an outside perspective, strategy, controls. What other things they can bring is skills, experience, knowledge. When you appoint a director, you need to have a diverse composition, but you need to make sure that at least few of the members of the board have successful experience in the sector in which the organization is working. They need to bring an evaluation to the performance of the board and the management. They need to be very strong on the values. It's not only about how you are, what you achieve and what you achieve with respect to your KPIs, but very important on the values of, on the respect that you have for each other, on the respect that you have for each of the members of the management, on the other directors, the shareholders. What are the values of the company? And if you look into the website of the three companies that I have mentioned to you, Sunroof Casino, Byterek, and the Astana International Financial Center, you will find out that the objective and the mission of those companies is very well defined, as well as the values. So I would say the ranking that Kazakhstan is having internationally is very well deserved because you have already a very advanced governance on the companies. As you have in the university, for example, that is competing internationally with the best universities in the world at a very different price. Because I think it is very generous from the state to allow so many students, many from Kazakhstan, but not only from Kazakhstan, to have affordable access to the best education in the world. Then the board also, sorry, I come back to my presentation, it plays a key role in some areas of the interest of the management, in which you will have some views or not, but normally you have some committees that are in charge of specific issues. You have the auditing committee, you have the remuneration committee, you have the HR succession planning, and all these are very important key functions and extremely sensitive, as you can imagine. Now, shareholders overall in the world, if you look wherever you want, they like independent directors. And if you look into the value of the companies with directors and without independent directors, you will find out that there is a correlation of higher value on a company that has independent director that does not have. And this is why it is important. Now, this is not only important for public companies like state or companies that have many shareholders like the ones that are listed in the stock market, but it's also very important for family companies. There is some research that has been done that says that 95% of the family businesses do not survive the third generation of ownership. You have grandfather that worked his back to create the company. His son saw him and he committed to continue. The grandson lived a little bit, probably more relaxed. Probably he had lost this sense of seriousness, this sense of challenge. And there is some research that is saying that family companies, 95% of them, do not survive the granddaughter and grandson direction of it. That's why it's very important to bring independent directors, because they are going to bring external, they are going to benchmark, they are going to do the checks and balances, they are going to be challenging their decisions. Now, independence is very important, but it's extremely important, I have been telling you, members of the board do not need to go there to please everybody, to have a cup of tea, but they need to challenge, they need to question, because at the end of the day, they are responsible for the overseeing of the company. The same will happen in the Duma, in the Senate. They need to challenge the government. They need to question, because they are accountable for the population. They bring qualification and expertise, some of them, maybe not all of them, but you need to have a good composition, a good diversity in the board. You need to bring some understanding of the business, very important, but very importantly for me, through my career, has always been much more important the attitude than the skills. The skills you can learn, but your character, you cannot change it. You have either a very strong character that you are fighting all the time, and this is what you need in the board, politely and with discipline, or you have a character of let things go. This does not work for the board. It may work for other things, but not for the board of companies. Skills you can learn, character you cannot learn. I think that's it about governance. We will continue with my presentation on sustainability. Probably I'll try to do it in 5-10 minutes so that we can have questions and answers. Now, sustainability is extremely important. You have heard about the United Nations Sustainable Goals. It took them years to come to the conclusion that there would be 17 sustainable goals. This has been agreed 3, 4, 5 years ago. And now all the public agencies, all the countries, they have the same and common agenda. And it's very important. No poverty, no hunger, good health and good well-being, quality education like you guys, gender equality. And I know how important this is and how important it is to make sure that women in our society are not seen as objects. They should be seen and accepted as somebody else with exactly the same qualifications, I would even add, if not better than us, with exactly the same rights as male. And it is very important when you think about the board, sorry that I come back to my concept, that you also have gender diversity, which I didn't see, by the way, I didn't see a single woman, it's coming to my mind now, in the board of the 3 companies that I saw. This is not good. Kazakhstan needs to work more on that. When I was in EBRD, we were working more on that, and I was so much shocked and surprised that there are 130 jobs that women cannot have. But this is a list that has been reduced from 280. So it's on the way, but this is not enough. Clean water, affordable and clean energy, extremely important for sustainability. Work and economic growth is all about that. Industry, innovation, and infrastructure, R&D. No inequalities. There is no reason why we are not the same each other. Extremely important. Sustainable cities. I think Nur Sultan Astana is a good example of a city that has been conceived to be green, to be sustainable, despite a very difficult place where it was decided to be placed. Responsible consumption and production, climate action, we'll talk more about this, life below water, life on land, peace, justice, and strong institutions. This is extremely important. And this comes back to accountability and also to governance and partnership of the goals. So we know United Nations has done that. Now, when people talk about sustainability, we talk about 3 big areas. You, people and place, you need to be feeling that your life is sustainable. You need to adapt, you need to be connected, you need to be part of an ecosystem, and you need to feel that you belong. The economy needs to grow, and the wealth needs to be shared in equal ways. Maybe not very political correct what I'm going to say here. Kazakhstan has many successes, but one thing where there's still work to do is in sharing all the wealth that has been created over time. An environment, and this is a topic of the whole world, as you know, we need to consume what the environment is giving us in a way that we are not depleting it, in a way that we're going to keep it for the future generations. Now, let me go a little bit more. Economic sustainability. On the public sector, is GDP growth is extremely important, and I should mention is distribution of wealth, is the level of debt to GDP. Kazakhstan has very low level of debt to GDP thanks to all the old resources that it has. Taxes, you need to tax people, not too much, but enough to pay for the development of the country. You need to not overspend either in expenses or in investment. The government has an obligation to protect the vulnerable. And just to mention a little bit, and because I was shocked, I was not shocked, I would say pleased, and I was somehow, I had some emotions when I heard a speech that Christine Lagarde gave when she left the IMF. She said, the IMF is an organization that to the countries it gives 3 things. Money, because it gives money when they need. It gives brain, because it gives knowledge to the governments and to the central banks. And heart, because it's compassionate. And this is what it is all about. In the private sector, companies have the responsibility to grow. They don't need to have too much debt. They need to keep their liquidity. Very important, they need to innovate all the time. If you don't innovate, you will be out of the market. And now with COVID and before COVID, but even more with COVID, we need to innovate. You need to take care of human resources. It's the most important asset that the companies have. And finally, because I was working in EBRD, a little bit of advertising, we were giving financial support, we were giving technical assistance both to the companies and to the government, and policy dialogue. And what I mean by that, we were helping to create the legal environment to enable development. Social sustainability. Let me talk to you to something I'm sure you are familiar, which is the Maslow pyramid. Very important. We all satisfy our physiological needs, air, water, food, shelter. This is before anything. Well, I think now we should add Wi-Fi there. We all need to have access to internet. And I would put it in the very first ranking because this is communications, this is freedom. Second, we need to have safety, we need to have security, we need to be sure that our personal property is not going to be stolen. We need to make sure that we will have an employment, that will have resources and health. And after that, you think about love, about family, about friends. Then you think about your esteem, your status, your recognition, and finally, about your self-actualization. How you reinvent yourself. Sorry to say, for me, this exercise that we're having today is giving me the pleasure to reinvent myself, to be challenged by you, to prepare my presentation. This is giving me pleasure. Very important, inclusion, gender. I already mentioned the importance of women. And I'm sorry to say, but we also need to be open to the LGBTQ community. And I know that this is a difficult matter for traditional societies, but people should have the right to be whatever they want. And I may have not been born like that because I also come from a traditional family, but having grown children, none of them is gay or lesbian, but if they are, I will love them as much as I love them the way they are. And we need to respect that. We need to take care about the young, particularly now with COVID, is affecting so much the employment opportunity of you guys and those who are separated in the rural. These are extremely important to make sure. Now, environment. We need to protect our environment. It has limited resources. Water is limited, energy, and it's very important also the recycling of it. Let me go, because we have little time. I want to talk specifically about renewable energy because of Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan is an oil and gas country, but is the leader in the region on solar energy. Now the installed capacity of solar energy in Kazakhstan is close to 4% of the total capacity. You may think 4% is little, but it's a lot. These are huge and massive investments. And very importantly, these are foreign investors that have come to Kazakhstan because they feel that there is an enabling environment for them to invest in this sector and make money. And what is even more interesting overall in the world is that the cost of energy is going down. When I started the first projects I saw on solar energy, the cost per kilowatt was 12 cents of a dollar. This went down to 8, to 6, to 4. In Uzbekistan, which is another leading country in the region, they made a tender for solar energy, and the winner has bid 2.5 cents of a dollar per kilowatt. For those of us who are practitioners, we think that this is a benchmark that is going to make solar energy the future of the world much faster than you can imagine. And all of those that have been betting into oil and gas are going to be surprised because solar is going to move very quickly. But you also have wind, and you have geothermal that is not in this drawing, but you have hydropower. And there are some countries like Georgia, where I live, that the dependence on hydropower is extremely important. Now, let's talk about the Paris Agreement. You have heard, all of you, about the Paris Agreement. This is an agreement that all the countries gathered, and they reached an agreement. One big country then left. Mamma mia, terrible. Everybody's unhappy. Hopefully, with the change of administration, it will come back. But it's an agreement where all the countries have focused mainly to reduce emissions and to reduce the temperature of the world. And Kazakhstan has signed and committed to very aggressive objectives. I told you that 4% of the energy of Kazakhstan is today renewable. They have set as an objective 3% by 2020. They're already at 4%. But the objective of Kazakhstan is to arrive at 30% of the energy in the country to be from renewable by 2030. This is Germany 10 years ago or 5 years ago. And by 2050, 50%. These are extremely enormous objectives, and I can only commend the vision of Kazakhstan to deliver to their commitments. Sustainability is a big topic for companies. There are some leaders in the world. You can see here, this is the most recent report 2020. These are the topics that are more interested. These are private companies that are asked. Climate change is extremely important. Biodiversity loss, we are losing species around the world. Water is something that we need to take care. Water pollution, poverty, economic inequality, plastic waste, how many plastic wastes? And I can go so on and so forth, but I would only mention that there are some companies that they are leaders, but I would say that all the ecosystem and every company is doing efforts into this. We don't see anymore, or almost don't see, this plastic packet in the product store. They are moving into paper. This is much better, although they need to kill trees to do that. But at least there is an effort to go into this direction. Now, the not so good news is that the COVID has derailed the agenda. And according to the same people that did this, they are worried that sustainability is losing a little in the interest in the world, that people are less worried about inequalities. On the other hand, are more worried about the environment, they're more worried about social issues, but COVID has come to change and transform the world. It's going to accelerate the digital transformation of the world. I hope it will not derail the sustainability agenda in the world, but it's going to change. It has changed us. It gave me the opportunity to talk to you without being there. This is a plus. But on the other hand, it is limiting also a lot of things for many people. I think that's it. I thank you very much for your attention. I hope you are still there. And I look forward to receiving some of your comments and questions. Ricardo.
Thank you very much, Bruno. It was a fantastic presentation. It was very, very interesting and stimulating. Actually, if you look in the chat, there's a question for you from Akbikesh Mukhtarova, who's asking you, thank you very much for your interesting presentation. You have mentioned the importance of the independent expertise for good governance, state and error business. In your view, does the independence equals the externality? Meaning, in the terms of knowledge transfer, certainly the involvement of foreign experts to local senior company management is important. However, in terms of local expertise enhancement, from your experience, how do you think in developing countries context, is it possible the local specialists to act as independent experts? Thank you very much.
Listen, I think it's a very good question. And I think in my presentation, I gave somehow a presentation and I have even highlighted. I said that in the specific case of Samruk Casino, which is the board that I have praised the most, you'd have not only brought external advisors, 4 of them, but you brought one private sector company, which is the internal expertise of the market. The CEO, the owner of the founder of ARG brand. I think it's extremely important. Now, it is very important to be local, but to think global. I'm sure you have heard that. It is extremely important that you bring the local twist of things. But at the same time, you need to gather the international part, because at the end of the day, we all live in society. I don't know if anybody else has another question, and I don't know how to look into the chat here. I'm going to try to. Thank you so much. It was very useful. Okay, here it is. Yes, I have the chat. Okay.
Hello, sir. Is there a possibility to ask question via the voice?
Yeah, I'm listening to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I hope the connection is fine. And my question is related to the chairman. You've mentioned that it is very important that the board itself consists of independent members. But when it comes to the chairman, as you have mentioned, there are a lot of companies in Kazakhstan that have the sole shareholder in the face of the government. And in most of the cases, the government or the sole shareholder assigns the chairman of the board. And when it comes to those kind of situations, what is your opinion on the independence and your opinion on whether it's fine practice or not really? Should the government be appointing chairman that is independent? That is my question. Thank you very much for answering in advance.
Thank you. Listen, we need not to forget three cases that I gave, which is Samru Casino by Terek and the Astana International Financial Center. These are assets and companies owned by the government. And I think it is perfectly fine for the owner of the company to have the position of the chairman. Because at the end of the day, it is their company, it's not the company of the foreigners. They have a much more interest to make them efficient. But that's also why I was saying that, in my view, the board should have an odd number, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, so that in case of not coming to an agreement, you have a majority that is decided rather than the chairman of the company. Because in companies, in boards where you have an even number, it is the chairman that can say, this is what I decide. It's probably better practice, I don't know, maybe to have a difference so that majority votes. But again, at the end of the day, the board cannot take over the ownership of the company. And if I had myself a private company, I would be very happy to open a board and to invite others to bring and to challenge me, but it's my company. And I want to make the ultimate decision, and I want to be the chairman and the leader. And if the majority thinks against me, that's fine. But I am the owner of that. And the same will happen with the public sector. So my view would be, this is fine. And it's well deserved.
Bruno, there's another question from Anar Sheikhinova.
Well, yes, I agree that there are many quasi-companies, as you call them, state sector. Can they be privatized? Well, I tried to look into list of companies that could be privatized. You know, in order to privatize a company, you need to privatize a business that is working well. And if the business is working well, the owner doesn't want to sell it. So you have a little bit this dichotomy. I think there are many companies, many of them are social companies all over the country, and the stores around the corner, or maybe the kindergarten and all these. This cannot be privatized. This is a service that needs to be performed. I wouldn't go into that direction. I think there are some companies, industrial, that you can prepare for a privatization. And one of the things is to improve the governance, to improve the decision making, to improve the finance, the strategy, and so on and so forth. But the privatization is not for every single company. To privatize, you need to privatize something that has value. And at the same time, you are ready to privatize it because you think that those who are going to buy a piece of it, not necessarily the whole of it, and it can be a minority or could be a quasi-majority, are going to improve the value of the company. So let me see, I'm looking here to, let's state, yes, I think there should be definitely much less state activity in Kazakhstan economy, that's for sure. At the same time, why it has not happened? Well, I don't know. You saw in my presentation that Kazakhstan is ranking 25 of doing business in the world, but still, if you look into who has invested in the country, it's mainly natural resources companies. By the way, if you speak with them, they are very happy with the business. They have visibility, predictability, and they think that they have done a good long-term investment where everybody is making wealth and value over time. But at the same time, and as I was living in Kazakhstan, I know that it's not necessarily that easy to do business. And I said doing business is a little bit artificial because it's like when you go to school, you know what are the questions that the exam you're going to answer. But by answering the questions of the exam, that doesn't make you smarter. What makes you, it gives you a good grade. So not only Kazakhstan, but all the countries, including Russia, that I said it has improved a lot. They knew what were the questions. They knew what they need to focus on, and they made sure that when they will have the next review of the World Bank, they will be back into that. But that doesn't mean that the regular entrepreneur has it easier to do business. India is the worst performing country in the pandemic. Well, I don't know. According to the media, 1.8 million have lost their job and GDP fallen 23. Why did this happen? Well, I think if we start talking about COVID, we will not stop and we will have no answers because we don't know. My sense is that in the medium to long term, the countries and what is happening with COVID is somehow going to converge. And about the same percentage of people, of population will be infected, and about the same percentage, probably a bit more and less, will die depending on the quality of the health services. It may well be that in the case of India, they have lost a lot of lives. And with regards, that's about the life impact and the social impact. With regard to the economic impact, it is different. And I don't know. I don't know what has happened in India. But what I can tell you is that governments that have been able to sustain more or less their economy ongoing, or they have been less affected, and less affected is a decrease of 10% of GDP, which is totally unprecedented. In my 35 years professional life, I've never seen a decrease of GDP of 10%, and these are the less affected. Many countries, 15, 20, 23, as you say, and the difference has been with regards the economic program that the authorities have been put together. How they have been sustaining the employment, how they have been protected the companies, how they have given time companies to pay for the taxes, because at the end of the day, what has to be protected is employment. So even if in an extraordinary way, that's my view, a government needs to pay for those employment to remain, this is going to be costly, but much less costly than to go into bankruptcy and to lose all these employments that it took generations to create. The outcome of that is going to be all the countries will have a bit more of public debt, and the future generations will need to pay for it.
Bruno, sorry, this is the last question because otherwise we go too much over time.
It's about the number of board members in Byterek. You know, 8 or 10 is not a big difference. Byterek has a very important responsibility in the country, is all the financial assets of the country. I don't think there is a big difference between 8 and 10. I have seen board of 12, 14 people, probably beyond that is important, but 8 or 10 is not really a big difference. That's it, Ricardo.
Thank you, Bruno, for a fantastic explanation. It was very interesting. You put together two things that, at least in the courses we teach, we don't always put together. It was fascinating. You brought a lot of examples about the country and the region. That was very, very useful. It was really heartwarming to see how good we are doing over here. And it's good that we are not saying here just in GSPP, but you know, you living in Spain are painting a similar picture. This is fantastic news. Thank you so much for the presentation. Thanks to Laura for making this happen. And thanks to all the participants for coming and spending 1 hour with us and listening to Bruno. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for the invitation.